now? Exodus 2:11-15. Wrong thing. Exodus 2:11-15. through 15. One day Moses had grown up. He went out to his people and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and held him and hid him in the sand. So, he committed premeditated murder.
Yes,
Think about
it. Sure did.
It says right here, starting at 11, one day Moses had grown up. He went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So yes, the guy was beating an Egyptian, one of his people, but Moses looked around to see if anybody was looking. He didn't see nobody, so he struck him. He murdered him and then hid him in the sand.
Sure
so
did.
that is premeditated murder. So Moses committed premeditated murder. Let's look at another great Bible figure of the Bible. Who doesn't like this next one? Rahab. Oh, everyone likes Rahab. Rahab is a really great person. Without doing any Old Testament research, you might consider Rahab an amazing, blameless woman of faith. The first New Testament book mentions her as one of the people. She was the one who hid God's prophets. Remember that story?
Yeah.
Heroes of Faith, Hebrews 11:31, and the New Testament book of James even gives her a shout out. Even James talks about her because she hid God's prophets when the enemy was coming. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember
Hid
that.
him in the cave?
Sure did.
But turn to Joshua 2, and read the rest of the story, Steve. One thing immediately jumps out. Rahab is a prostitute. In other words, Steve, she has sex with multiple men.
Yes, she did.
That are not her husband. And even pretense under which Rahab agrees to accept the Israelite species is strange.
Yeah, she would have got caught. She would have been dead.
She bluntly lies. She is encouraged to lie, and she is recognized as a woman of faith because she lies. So think about it, Steve. Rahab is a prostitute. She sleeps with other men and she lies. Okay? That's a great Bible. Would you want her in your church preaching if she does all that?
Nope, not at the moment.
Nope. In most conventional churches these days, they wouldn't let her in there either. Let's talk about David. God said that David has a heart for me. Oh, God looked up to... Think about it, David and Goliath. He slung that rock and went ping, and it knocked him right between the eyes and knocked the giant out. He slayed a huge human. And God said that David has a heart for me. Right?
Right.
And David sounds like a really nice guy, but things go south from there. David is overcome by lust. David takes a woman who is not his wife and has sex with her. The woman Bathsheba becomes pregnant. In an attempt to cover up the mess, David sends Bathsheba's husband Uriah onto the front line of a battle to be killed. So in a string of sins unrevealed anywhere in the Bible, this man after God's own heart lusts, fornicates, lies, captures, and murders. Okay, that's King David.
Yeah, it is.
Would you let him back in your church to preach?
Not until he gets delivered. Which he
and
does.
Let's talk about Paul. No, Peter. No, Paul, yeah.
Yeah,
Paul.
Peter or Paul, either one.
Let's talk about Paul. Paul was another great man. He was one of the disciples of Jesus. Paul was a great man, so everyone thinks. But Paul, they say Paul was after that Paul was a great man in the Bible. God even talks about him. But let's look at Paul for just a minute. Even though he walked with Jesus and did mighty great things, but yet Paul, you guessed it, Paul has a past as well, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
He not only preaches against Jesus, he preaches those who practice Christianity in Acts 22:4. Let's go to Acts 22:4. Paul gives approval to the death of Stephen, the first Christian martyr, Acts 8:1. So Acts 22:4. So let's go to Acts. Acts 22, verse 4. I persecuted this way to death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women. So basically, he crucified Christians. He preached against Jesus, and he crucified Christians for believing in Jesus before he became a disciple.
Yes, he did.
Okay? So, as we spoke about these great Bible figures that no one ever tells you the real truth about, what do they all have in common?
They all have a past.
Correct. Every last one of them has done something or another that is very either sinful, wrong, or not godly at all.
Or
Moses committed
murdering.
premeditated murder, not godly at all.
Yes.
According to what?
God's laws.
Okay, let's say it this way. They did wrong stuff, and they had a past, and they were not godly according to who? Was it according to God or according to man?
Man and God.
Hold on. According to God or according to man?
I say God.
According to God or according to man?
God and man.
Let's skip God right now. According to God or
let's
according
put
to
it this
man?
way. Let's say, I know what you're asking. I know. Okay. Your question is, it's man.
Right. I'm going to get somewhere in a minute. Why? So all of them were according to man, that they were so wicked people, they were ungodly. But I'm going to get that in just a minute. We're going to talk about one more Bible character.
Because they were God commandments.
We're going to talk about one more Bible character and why I say it's according to man. Let's talk about Jesus.
All right.
You're going to say, Chaplain Andrew, what did Jesus do wrong? Right?
Yeah,
We're talking about Bible characters who have passed. So what did Jesus do wrong? Now you're really looking at me funky, aren't you?
Okay, go ahead.
He is perfect, isn't he, Steve?
Yeah.
Jesus is sinless, yes. And he is perfect, yes. But not perfect by what? Man's standards.
All right.
Let me tell you why he's not perfect by man's standards. Jesus doesn't get in line with traditional church ways. Number one. According to man, he doesn't follow the way man does church.
Right.
Okay? So he doesn't get in line with traditional church ways. He often affirms the sinners and condemns the church leaders. Remember when he called them vipers? He said, "You vipers."
Yeah.
So he went over to Matthew and all those other people's house that were sinners, and he affirms the sinners and condemns the church leaders. He hangs out with characters, cheaters, thieves, and the sexual immoral. He does hang out with those. He preaches sermons that offend people. He drives away masses instead of catering to them. Remember when he had all those disciples?
Yes, I did.
And he says, "Take, eat, this is my body, this is my blood." The first thing that all of them did, but 12 of them left? All of them but 12 left? Why? Because they thought that he was a weirdo? Because the Bible says you should not eat flesh or blood, but yet he was talking about eating flesh and blood. But it wasn't real flesh and blood. It was symbolic to his body.
Right.
So, not only does he hang out with cheaters, thieves,
liars,
and he's sexual immoral, he preaches sermons that offend people. He drives away the masses instead of catering to them. In fact, he is so imperfect by human standards that the church leaders decide to kill him. They decide to nail Jesus on the cross because they think in their own right mind that he is imperfect. But let me go back for a minute. Moses was imperfect, right?
Right.
Paul and all these other people, even I think Peter, that said you are the Son of God, Christ, the Son of a living God, right?
Right.
He said he was Christ. He was imperfect. He crucified Christians as well. But here's the thing. What else do they all have in common? They all have a past. What else do they all have in common?
They all sin.
But on a good note, what else do they have in common?
No.
Moses got the 10 Commandments. Okay?
Yeah.
A lot of things happened. Uriah, she helped hide the prophets. Those are big things that they all did.
Yeah, they did things for God.
They all did big miracle things. They all did.
You know why they did?
Go ahead.
Because they're human.
And because Jesus knew that even though they had faults. See, Moses and everyone else was like Swiss cheese. They had so many holes in their soul because of all the wrong things they did.
Oh, yeah.
But Jesus saw the beauty of those holes and said, yeah, you did this, you did that, and yes, this, that, and the other thing was done as well from you. But I still see the beauty in the good in those holes. And I see that you still have it in you to do great and wondrous miracles. Moses never made it to the promised land, the land of milk and honey. That's a totally different story. Because he struck the rock out of anger, remember that?
Right.
And the water gushed. But, that's a different story. But even though, God still used them in mighty ways. So here's where the message is going at now. Now, we talked about the Bible characters and all that. And yes, Jesus is perfect. But according to man's standards, Jesus was imperfect. So imperfect that they crucified him on the cross. So, if Jesus was that imperfect that they had to crucify him, why did they crucify him?
Because they thought that he was the devil.
They thought they could get rid of him. There's an old song that's called God Gave the Song from Bill Gaither. Great singer. We're going to go see him soon on the 14th. I'm so excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, in the song it says, then, and the song is about how God created music. And in the middle of the whole song, and Bill is talking at the time, and he says, and they nailed that song to a tree. They're talking about Jesus.
Right.
And they said to themselves, there, that should take care of it. But it didn't. Did it not, Steve?
You know, some Christians don't believe in music.
Yeah, I know. But did that stop him?
No.
He rose from the dead after 3 days. So, let's talk about the people that are listening, even though I have a past and you have a past.
Oh, definitely.
Nobody is perfect. I'll give away my past. I used to be gay as a $3 bill.
Yeah.
A fruitcake. Now I'm married, have a wife, and want children. And we could possibly have one soon.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of your past.
In my past, I was a gigolo. Probably slept with 2,000 or 3,000 women.
Not a joke either. He was bad news. If he went to hell back then, he'd split it wide open in the handbasket. So would I. We'd both be in hell right now. But even though God sees that you and the people listening, Steve, me, you, and the people listening have a past, God can still use great, wondrous things and do great, wondrous things through us. My pastor at the Nine Mile Church on 9 in Van Dyke, he was an alcoholic for years. Get drunk as a skunk all the time. Do all kinds of drugs and all that stuff. God used him. He owns a church now. He preaches to the masses. I mean, he may have been preaching to, thousands and thousands of people.
And he's a mighty Southern preacher, too.
He's a what?
Mighty Southern preacher.
Right. But he does preach to the masses. And he preaches to people.
Sure does.
I go live on Facebook whenever I get a chance to on my church there. And even our bishop, he learned how to He learned how to shave cards and
Even the devil tried to take him out a little while ago.